Good evening. The Planning Commission meeting of March 1st, 2023 will come to order. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The Secretary will call roll.
Commissioner Mayer,
Here.
Commissioner Mann. Here. Commissioner Kennedy,
Present.
Vice Chairperson Rice,
Here.
Chairperson Tolson.
Here. May I have a motion for approval of the agenda?
Move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Second.
Made by Vice Chair Rice and a second by Commissioner Mann. Unless there are any other objections, the agenda stands approved. We have minutes from December 7th. May I have a motion for approval of the minutes?
Move to approve the minutes of December 7th, 2022.
A second?
I'll second it.
Thank you very much. A motion was made by Vice Chair Rice and a second by Commissioner Mayer. Unless there are any objections, the minutes are approved. The Secretary will read the declaration of conflict.
If any member of the Planning Commission may have a conflict of interest or any reason why that member must abstain from consideration of any matter on this agenda, he or she should so declare at this time.
Are there any declarations of conflict? All right. This is the time allotted for public statements or comments on all items other than public hearing items. Is there anyone in the chamber wishing to be heard? Apparently not. Is there any correspondence from the Deputy Director, City Planner?
None tonight.
Okay. May I have a motion for approval of the consent calendar?
Motion to approve consent calendar.
Second?
Second.
Beautiful. A motion was made by Commissioner Mann and a second by Commissioner Mayer. Unless there are any objections, the consent calendar stands approved. Some people are happy there. This is the time and place set aside for a public hearing on the consideration of Z-S-2023-001 to amend portions of the Title IX of the Simi Valley Municipal Code related to updating regulations for mobile food vendor standards on private commercial and industrial properties to allow for Type 4 mobile food facilities, food trucks, on private non-residential properties, and a determination that the project is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. Are there any ex parte communications to report? Having heard none, may we have an oral report on this matter by staff?
Yes, Chairman Tolson, members of the Planning Commission. Yes, this is a proposed code update to our municipal code that's been requested as part of our many code updates over the past couple years. Our assistant planner, Zarui Chaparian, is going to make the presentation.
Good evening, Honorable Commissioners. Tonight, we're going to discuss and provide the proposed code amendments under Z-S-2023-0001 to allow Type 4 mobile food facilities or food trucks on commercial and industrial properties within the city. Under the current code, Types 1, 2, or 3 mobile food facilities are allowed to operate on commercial and industrial properties for a 12-month period with a temporary use permit or a TUP. These food facility types include vehicles that carry uncut produce, prepackaged foods, and vehicles that sell coffee, hot dogs, churros, and popcorn, and the like. Type 4 vehicles, widely known as food trucks, are where food is prepared in the vehicle. They are currently allowed only with a group assembly TUP or unless located on certain school district or park district properties as part of a special event. Please note that tonight's proposed ordinance does not cover on-street or sidewalk operations for food trucks and only addresses private property zoning provisions. The food truck industry has seen a 7.5% growth between 2015 and 2020, growing into a $2 billion industry. Food trucks allow first-time restaurant owners an opportunity to be creative, offer diverse dining opportunities, and see good returns. Food trucks will also stimulate the local economy via tax revenues to the city and generate foot traffic to stimulate local businesses. And with the recent city ordinance that allows for microbreweries, wineries, and distilleries in industrial and commercial zones, there is a potential for a mutually beneficial relationship between the two uses. With the code amendment, Type 4 mobile food facilities will be allowed with a standalone TUP. One TUP will be required per location of operation. Food trucks will be allowed on the majority of commercial and industrial zones. Staff noted a correction that we have updated in tonight's resolution. As a correction to the code amendment, one mobile food vendor may be allowed for properties with a planned development or CUP area of up to 150,000 square feet, and an additional mobile food vendor may be allowed for developments that exceed 150,000 square feet of gross floor area. A food truck can take up to 800 square feet of parking area, provided that the required number of parking spaces already exists on the subject property. There shall be a 4-foot wide clearance around the vehicles for pedestrian access, and the location of food trucks may not impede vehicular or pedestrian circulation on the proposed site. The food truck may not be within 300 feet of any other existing restaurant or coffee shop, and this must be shown on a proposed site plan required for approvals, and must be within 30 feet of a trash or discard container. No overnight parking or freestanding signs will be permitted. Any lighting will need to meet the city's exterior light and glare requirements. A notarized property owner approval, vehicle registration, and county health permit will also need to be provided. This aerial depicts the Target Shopping Center on Cochrane, the Sycamore Village, and Sycamore Square shopping centers. As you can see, staff identified existing restaurants in these shopping centers and provided a 300-foot buffer around each of these restaurants to demonstrate where a food truck may be located on the properties. Sycamore Square has the potential to have a food truck locate near Hobby Lobby, and a Target Plaza may have space south of the Trader Joe's and in the little sliver of parking area north of Target. These reflect current conditions. This aerial depicts the industrial area between Royal and East Los Angeles and Tapple Canyon Road. As you can see, there are no restaurants or coffee shops in this area. The ordinance would benefit underserved areas and may not directly compete with nearby restaurants. It is recommended that the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council approval of Z-S-2023-0001 and a determination that the amendments are exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. This concludes staff's presentation, and we are available for questions.
Thank you very much. Are there questions of staff by commissioners? Vice Chair Rice?
Sorry, thank you. How did staff come up with the 300-foot setback?
The 300-foot setback, Vice Chair, was a suggested starting point from our economic development staff to help offset potential conflict with brick and mortar restaurants. And that was just a proposed starting point as far as the 300-foot radius.
Okay, because it just seems like that's an awfully big, that's an incredibly long distance. 300 feet is a long way. I mean, I am all for supporting brick and mortars, but 300 feet is an incredible distance. I just think that's too far. I mean, That's a long way. So I just think that's something we should consider. I see that you have other examples here from other cities. You have Ventura and Moore Park and South Pasadena that you've looked at, examples of their permitting requirements, and Oxnard, Glendale. So you've obviously done your due diligence. I was just curious, do they have those kind of requirements? Or like, especially like Moore Park and Thousand Oaks, do they have that kind of a requirement of distance?
We did not come across any of those requirements in our research.
Okay. Thank you.
And part of the analysis, and you saw the graphic to see what
Yeah.
300 really means.
Yeah.
And part of your recommendation to the city council, that number may be adjusted, or you can
Sure.
make suggested revisions.
Well, then I would like to consider that we reduce that, that not drastically, but at least reduce it to maybe 200 or maybe even 250. I just think 300 is just too far. I mean, that's a football field. That's an incredible distance right there. So that's just my 2 cents. The rest of the ordinance, I'm okay with, at least for now. I think that staff's done a great job. It looks like to me, for now, but
It might be that between now and the time it goes to the city council, they can find out what the distance is in our neighboring cities.
I hope so.
Yeah, sounds like that'd be a compelling question.
At this point, I think I would recommend just questions of staff, then open the public comment, and then if you have leaning one way or another, you can make that suggestion then.
Perfect.
Okay.
We have Commissioner Mayer.
I have a couple of questions too. What is considered overnight parking?
That term is not very well defined. It's somewhat generalized. It's, we looked at other cities and tried to see what they suggested. Thousand Oaks suggested 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. operations. We can ask, if you would have any recommendations on adding that provision. But other cities didn't really have any suggested times of operation.
Adding to that, if there is a vehicle that is parked overnight, who would be responsible for enforcing those rules? Who would the residents report that to
That'll be
during the
code
night?
enforcement. Code enforcement?
During the night?
Yes, because it's on private property.
I have no questions for now.
Beautiful. Commissioner Kennedy.
Yeah, I'll continue with that. If you could, I had the same question on overnight hours. Obviously, that needs to be defined before you can enforce anything. And is code enforcement available late nights and weekends to be able to enforce an overnight code? And if you could inform me a little bit more, well, I'll wait for the next, so I can answer that.
So regarding overnight parking, that's like Mr. Chaparian said, that is more of a generalized term. One suggestion is if we want to ratchet that down, we could suggest an hour of operation restrictions such as 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. to cease mobile food vending or not allow them. That would clearly say no parking or no operation during that time frame, because there may be a situation where although the ordinance states the vending periods kind of goes in line with the business hours of the shopping center, there's a trend for late night food trucks if the decision makers don't want to see overnight food vending. They could put that time limit. That would solve the overnight definition and also resolve those hours of operation. As far as code enforcement goes, code enforcement staff usually reacts to complaints. They don't go looking for situations, so it's more complaint-based. And if there is an overnight parking situation with a complaint received, then they'll take the appropriate steps.
Thank you. Second part of that is I'm looking at the requirements for approval with registration, insurance, things along those lines. That approval process, if you're going to approve it for a temporary use permit for a year, I don't understand that approval process you have in place. I think you have to take a look and make sure that stuff stays in effect. The registration doesn't expire during the time period. The insurance is kept up to date, all that.
Commissioner Kennedy, I don't know if that was a question, but part of the process is that they maintain a county environmental health permit. So the county makes sure the food truck vehicles are properly registered through that timeframe and not operating without permits. We check it. We don't go back and check throughout the entire year if it expires ahead of time. But usually we rely on environmental health to make sure their health permit and their vehicle remains up to par during that time frame. We will look at it again during the renewal process at the end of the year, or if they propose a different location, we'll always check that they have a valid business tax certificate and a copy of their valid health permit.
Thank you for that clarification.
You done? Commissioner Mann?
Trash containers. I see that the site must be within 30 feet, discard trash containers in order to avoid littering. Is that the trash containers that are there on site that the landlord has provided, or are they supposed to remove their own? Talk to me about trash.
It could be in either or situation, but they are going to be required to remove litter.
So they need to remove their own, because I'm assuming since they're on private property, they have an agreement with the landlord or the owner of the property that they can just go ahead and revoke that if the trash truck, or if the food truck doesn't comply with keeping the parking lot clean and tidy and all of the good stuff, correct?
That's correct.
But in order for the city to approve it, there has to be a trash receptacle of some kind. Is there a definition as to, is this a household trash can? Is it a 3 cubic yard trash can for like waste management? Is there a definition of how big this trash can needs to be?
We haven't defined that, but we definitely can.
My other question is, are we limiting, because if I read correctly, is it one food truck for every 150,000 square feet of space?
Up to 150,000 square feet of an approved PD or CUP project, there's one allowed food truck, and then anything over 150,000 square feet can have up to 2.
So can you bring up the graph right after this one that had the Royal? So any idea what that total square footage is in all those commercial buildings? I'm just kind of curious, is that one food truck? Is that 2? If somebody wanted to have a quote-unquote event and have multiple food trucks, are they limited by the total square footage of all those buildings? Or if it's an event, there's no limitation?
If there's an event, they would have to follow the special event guidelines or the group assembly guidelines. For,
Okay, but if it's not an event, it would just be one food truck per 150,000 square feet.
That's correct.
But the city doesn't regulate which food trucks can be at any one given place at any given time, correct?
And Chairman Mann, not Chairman,
Close
Commissioner
enough.
Mann. Commissioner Mann,
Promoted.
I think that graphic specifically, there's a large building on the right-hand side in the middle of the slide that's over 200,000 square feet in floor area, so that, I think that's the Amazon retailer. So
Right.
theoretically, they could get permits for 2 food trucks on that property. All those little buildings,
Well-
those are separate developments, so they could each have 1.
Okay, so it's not a minimum of 150,000, it's up to 150,000.
Correct.
Okay.
And that's the typographical correction we noted earlier today.
Got it, okay, perfect. That answers, signage. I've been to food truck events in the valley. Now, most of the ones that I've been to, the food trucks park on the street, so I'm assuming, again, it's a city-sponsored event or some kind. But most of them have like an A-frame sign or something out front. You were saying no signs whatsoever under the temporary use permit? No freestanding signs? So just the signage on the vehicles?
That is correct. On page 14, this is pre-existing language, and we added freestanding signage shall not be allowed under the proposed language.
I was looking on page 5, like halfway down, but that's okay.
Oh, yeah, page 14 is
Got
the resolution portion.
Subpart 5, G5,
Got it.
freestanding signage shall not be allowed.
And just for clarification, food trucks under type 1, 2, and 3, they're currently under the 100 feet. because again, I had a question about the 300 feet that seemed rather excessive. But the 1, 2, and 3 are under a 100-foot rule, right? Page 4, I think it says current code requires only 100 feet of display area for a TUP. Oh, no, current code requires only 100 feet of display area. That doesn't give anything about a radius. Is there a radius requirement for current type 1, 2, and 3, or is that? I'm on page 4, first bullet point down. The 300-foot radius.
Yeah, we currently allow a 100-foot map to show us where on the property it would be and what the distance would be from that facility up to 100 feet.
But under 4, we want to increase it to 300 feet, is again, the staff recommendation. Okay. That answers those questions. Thank you.
Anybody else? Additional questions? Okay. We will open the public testimony portion of the hearing. Is there anyone in the chamber wishing to be heard on this matter? Sir, we need to have you come fill out a blue card. Let's make it green, actually. Mr. Perini, are you ready?
Just had questions. Basically, the concern is I don't really see code enforcement run around on weekends or after hours. And if you have illegal vendors, so you go down to LA, and you'll see tents on the side of the road. I know that this isn't the situation, but if you have a food truck that hasn't paid its permit and just working improperly, how's that enforced? And I think right now, with a lot of restaurant owners, I think they're taxed. I think they're barely getting by, and I think it would impact them. So if there's revenue to be generated, what revenue per food truck would that be? And have you considered the loss of some of these restaurants closing down or employees being laid off? And I think the city fees that come with those restaurants, what would the loss to the city be with those if these struggling restaurants can't survive because they're just losing that much more? And I think people are starting to get back to going out and having activities. We have these food trucks and events we have at the parks and things like that. But if this is just something that you're going to say, hey, we're going to have them on the side of the road, because that's, I think, what I'm understanding there, and I might be misunderstanding it. Currently, they can have these events on private property. Is that correct?
Unfortunately, this is a,
Oh, I get to speak. Can't ask a question. Got it. Okay. So anyway, so if it's something that is currently allowed for me to have in my
Sorry to
backyard
interrupt just
or
for a
at
Mr.
my
Perini?
business.
You can actually pose questions and then let the commission decide whether or not they want to ask that same question to staff after you're done with your public testimony portion.
Okay. That's what I'll do. Thank you.
anybody else? Okay. Are there any comments from staff regarding the statements made during the public hearing?
Chairman Tolson and Commissioner Mann and staff. The clarification on Commissioner Mann's question on the 100-foot radius, more specifically, the 100-foot is to submit a site plan showing the surroundings within the 100 feet. It's not a setback, it's just a site plan submittal requirement. And we're changing that to 300 feet to just show the surrounding areas on a graphic so we know what we're looking at. It has nothing to do with setbacks. So that's more of a submittal requirement, show the surrounding parking lot within 100 feet or 300 feet, not restricting anything.
Okay.
In reference to page 4, so I just want to clarify we're not changing that reference you're referring to is nothing with the restaurant separation requirement.
If there are no further questions, we will close the public testimony portion of the hearing. Are there any comments or questions from members of the Planning Commission? Commissioner Kennedy.
Yeah, just, there was some discussion about the 300 feet, and you heard the concern about existing brick and mortar restaurants. I don't see that 300 feet is too much. I think that protecting our existing brick and mortar businesses, I've seen way too many go out of business, that's a reasonable distance to start this program with. If we get pushback on that, obviously, it can be addressed at a later time, but let's start with something that puts adequate protections in for our existing brick and mortar facilities.
Commissioner Mayer?
I wanted to thank the staff, and thank you, Sean. You did a great job, but Mr. Perini, I share your concerns with brick and mortar. I also want to say that I'm in support of any business that will create more revenue for the city and maybe some employment. I am concerned about code enforcement on weekends and during the nights and how that process is going to work out and what the actual process is of reporting when somebody sees a food truck operating after hours. So I would very much like to suggest to actually have those hours limited. And I would like to better understand how that's going to create revenue for the city. But, I mean, I guess that's for us to know in the future. Thank you.
Commissioner Mann?
Okay, so maybe I'm somewhat more confused. So there seems to be two different 300-foot topics of conversation. One is a 300-foot radius site plan that they need to give to get the TUP. But
Correct.
But separately, there is a suggested 300-foot buffer from brick and mortar restaurants.
That's correct.
Okay. So the first graphic, the one before this, that represents where, even if they submit a site plan with a 300-foot radius, they cannot operate in those areas that are in red, correct? Because they're within
That's the buffer.
the 300-foot buffer. Got it. Thank you. I'm done.
Sweet. Vice Chair Rice?
Well, and staff can correct me if I'm wrong, but basically, just for clarification here, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, but nobody is saying that a barbecue food truck is not gonna park itself in front of Red's and start selling barbecue sandwiches or something like that. And no food truck is gonna park in some residential neighborhood and start selling. Okay, because that's not what we're talking about here. And this is not like, they're going to start lining up, like they do in the valley and stuff like that. That's not at all what we're talking about here. So, and I think that sometimes we have a tendency to kind of expect that because we see this in the valley, that that's what's going to happen here. That is not at all what this ordinance is about. What we're talking about is a place like Amazon or something like that, that they can have food trucks come on there and they can feed their employees or something like that, or in a place like this, that these businesses can have a food truck and take care of their employees, or they can have an event, or a sofa place can have, an event where they can have a couple food trucks come in and have a big event, and sell sofas or whatever. I understand the brick and mortar thing, I do, and I understand we're coming back from COVID, I do, but we need to try different things, Some businesses are going to survive and some are going to fail, but we need to try different things for the city. And if we just keep doing the same thing, we have to try different things. We have to give people a variety, and we're not doing that. And this at least gives somebody a chance to do something different. And doing the same thing over and over again and is not working. So 300 feet, I still think is excessive. I think that, we can turn this over to, but I just want it known to City Council that I think 300 feet is excessive from brick and mortar stores, especially like to a coffee shop or something like that for somebody who's selling barbecue. And they actually may benefit from that because people may go buy a barbecue sandwich and then walk in there for something else. I think that may actually help them. So, because I see that, in other places where there are food trucks. I see people go get ice cream because they bought something at one place and they go somewhere else. So, and we're talking about a single food truck or maybe 2 food trucks. We're not talking about a large number of food trucks. Those things are still limited to public parks and with a permit or
A shorter temporary use permit.
short temporary use permits, single day, maybe 2-day permits. I don't know. Is that correct? So, this is not, so, and so that's my 2 cents. I just think that, we need to do something, and I don't know. I think we're just got our heads in the sand. We need to try something new, and that's where I'm at. So, that's all I have to say.
Okay.
Back to me.
Commissioner Mann.
The 300-foot buffer, that's from, is it a restaurant, or what defines a restaurant? Is a coffee shop considered a restaurant, or is it just a place that already serves food, or what?
It's a 300-foot buffer from restaurants and coffee shops. So a restaurant would be either takeout or sit-down establishment where people consume food.
Where do bars come into place? Are they considered a restaurant, or they're their own category?
I'm sorry, can you repeat
A
that?
bar.
A bar?
It depends if the bar serves food or not. It could also be a donut shop or some other small sort of shop, juice shop or whatever.
Would a donut shop be considered a restaurant?
Yep.
Okay. So if they serve food, basically, by some definition, they're a restaurant.
Coffee and whatnot.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so here's the question. We have a couple places in town now that do this very thing. On the corner of Sycamore and LA Avenue, adjacent to the gas station, there's a taco truck trailer that shows up there. Is that got to be 300 feet away from Ralph's grocery store that has a deli?
I wouldn't classify Ralph's as a restaurant.
Okay. So we also have another taco truck that sets up in the Aldi/Boot Barn parking lot 4 or 5 days a week. And I don't think there's any restaurants there short of Walmart. But that I think would be further away than 300 feet.
McDonald's is in Walmart.
There's not anymore.
Oh, shows you how often I go to Walmart.
Exactly. So the current status, which is the truck that's there now at the corner of Sycamore and LA, would have to move. Is that right? 300 feet from Ralph's.
No, Ralph's is not a restaurant.
Okay.
so-
Okay. That's okay.
Oh, sorry.
We heard that. I think we heard
I
that.
thought I heard Ralph's was a restaurant.
Okay.
No,
Sorry.
Ralph's supermarkets wouldn't be considered a restaurant.
Perfect. Okay. Would not be. Okay. Good. Commissioner Rice, you want to say something else, or I'm clear? Commissioner Mayor.
I just wanted to say I'm not against businesses. I'm not against expanding it. I'm just saying we need to have the same standards in code enforcement for all the businesses that are of the same category. That's what I believe in, so that we're not giving benefits to anybody who's just a mobile facility and can just take off without having proper permits. This is given that somebody's going to operate not and within what the law is. That's my point, not to not have food trucks and not to not support businesses.
So, anybody else? We're going to clear the list here. Distance-wise, I think the 300 is adequate, in terms of protecting our existing restaurants. Anywhere outside of those areas, whether it's the industrial complex, that's if it's within well of that. So if you're taking care of your employees, that's not going to be a problem. If you have enough footage, you can get 2 trucks over there. Overnight, I think the time frame, if we set aside a time or make a suggestion for some time, I think 11 to 7 is an appropriate overnight parking time. I think some of these food trucks want to take advantage of late night sells. And so that's why I'm thinking 11 to 7. That's just my opinion. Maybe be a little more specific on trash containers, because I know that most trash containers are locked after hours. And so someone who sets up a truck there is not going to be able to use those. And then signage, I'm happy with what's proposed because, again, as Mr. Perini said, I think we're trying to protect our existing businesses who have tremendous much more overhead than these food trucks, but yet at the same time having some a way for them to have some business and economy here in town. And so that is my opinion on what we've talked about. Do we want to come to consensus on the distance, or do we want to just, we need to come up with something so that we can have a,
Well, we can send it forward, but with just that, I'm just saying, I just think the distance is too far, but, you can send it forward with, as you send it forward, you can just say that one of the commissioners has questions about that distance. And
perfect.
that way I don't.
Perfect. Do we want to set times on the
I would prefer that.
overnight?
I'm good with your suggestion with 11 to 7. I think that's legitimate.
Perfect.
And I
And
agree with the trash containers too. I think that's a really good idea.
so these are just suggestions that can be,
Yeah, completely agree. Like the waste management, those,
Cardboard boxes.
the cardboard box ones they have, those would be,
But again,
Appropriate.
they're on private property with the owner's approval, so if the owner and the food truck go sideways because the food truck's making a mess, the owner's just going to revoke his permission.
true.
And so it's really, will resolve itself.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with that too.
So if the food truck creates a mess, the owner of the property is the one that has to complain to the food truck operator, not to the city, not to anybody else. So now that I have read this again, that it's on private property, owner's approval, it's up to the owner and the food truck to work out how they're going to handle that. It's,
so as written is fine.
as written, it's fine, actually, yes.
So it sounds like we are going to make the following,
I would still have a reading of a resolution and then entertain a motion as to what you believe the
with
Commissioners.
amendments. Okay. Thank you very much. May we have a reading of the resolution?
Resolution number SVPC 03-2023, a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Simi Valley recommending to the City Council approval of Development Code Amendment Z-S-2023-0001, amending portions of Title IX of the Simi Valley Municipal Code, SVMC, regarding mobile food vendor standards on private, commercial, and industrial properties to allow for Type 4 mobile food facilities, food trucks, and a determination that the project is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act.
The chair will now entertain a motion.
I can do it. Do we amend it right now, or?
Read it and then say with this amendment.
Okay. I move to adopt a resolution recommending approval of the ZS 2023-001, and determination that the amendments are exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, with the amendment of limiting hours 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Or the other way around.
No, you got it right.
Perfect. So do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Beautiful. So we have a motion made by Commissioner Mayer, second by Commissioner Mann. Can we call for the vote?
Motion passes unanimously.
The motion passes. There is no appeal period for the zoning text amendment, and the item will proceed to the City Council with the Planning Commission's recommendation. Does staff have anything to report?
Yes, Chairman Tulsa, members of the commission, we anticipate to do a cancellation of our March 8th Planning Commission meeting, and the following meeting would be March 29th of this month.
Beautiful. Okay. Do any commissioners have anything to report? Does staff, Mobile Home Rent Mediation Board, does the staff have anything to report?
No items tonight.
Tree Advisory Board, does staff have anything to report?
No items tonight.
This concludes the meeting of March 1st, 2023. The next scheduled meeting will be March 29th, 2023. This meeting is adjourned.